let's talk a little bit about Symantec Endpoint Protection 12.1, but first I have a little bit of housekeeping to do here. I just want to talk a little bit about myself. I'm an authorized Symantec consultant with IITs Partners. I have an endpoint management specialization. I focus pretty much exclusively on all the endpoint management and security solutions. This includes Client Management Suite, Server Management Suite, Symantec's mobile management, endpoint protection, and of course the complementary virtualization and different packaging technologies. So my experience and focus is pretty broad, but again, we're pointed directly at endpoint management and security here. A little bit about IITs Partners. I think most of you know us, but if you don't, we are a Symantec National Partner and Platinum Partner. We were selected as the Symantec Partner of the Year for 2011. And we were also the Altiris Partner of the Year for 2 of the 4 years that was awarded prior to Symantec acquiring Altiris. We are a Symantec Master Specialized Partner, and we focus, again, exclusively on endpoint management and security solutions. This means that we have a laser focus on the things that affect everything around the endpoint ecosystems, and we concentrate on that almost exclusively. Our firm is based in the fine city of Grand Rapids, Michigan. And something you may see on our marketing materials or our website is that we really tout our engineer centricity. And what this means is at every level in our organization, we have engineers driving the decision making, customer interaction, and the services that we provide. So those of you that work in IT fields, this is a great thing to have when you have engineers that are doing a lot of the decision making. So let's just cover a little primer about SEP 12.1. What is it? Well, it's the next generation of Symantec Endpoint Protection. It succeeds the SEP 11 product, which came out actually in 2007, so it's been out for quite a while now. And the SEP 12 release is going to bring a lot of exciting features that we're going to talk about today. What it's not is SEP 12.0. SEP 12.0 was actually a small business only release that came out around the mid-cycle of SEP 11 on the enterprise side. So I want to be very clear that we're talking about a new generation product that is really not related to SEP 12.0 at all. As you've heard me mention here, SEP comes in 2 editions. There's an enterprise and a small edition, business edition. So there are some distinct differences between those, and you want to be cognizant of what you're looking at as far as licensing and purchase. And again, this really is a market-leading suite of component protection. There are so many excellent proprietary components in SEP. They provide a great deal of protection and great intelligence, and we're going to highlight a lot of that today. Let's look at the major versions that have come out, and I just want to set the stage here and make sure that everyone understands what we're talking about with SEP 12.1. You can see back in 2007 that the enterprise edition of SEP 11 was released. RTM means released to market. In May 2009, we moved to MR4 Maintenance Pack 2. At that same time, the small business market then received a product called SEP 12.0. You'll notice that on the enterprise side, through the end of 2009, we proceeded with later releases of SEP 11.0. And the important thing I want to highlight with this graph is now with SEP 12.1, we have parity between both the enterprise and small business editions. So both markets are on the same release of technology and have feature parity. So something important to discuss here before we get into the feature sets is the supported upgrade paths. In general, you can go from just about any version of SEP 11 or SEP 12 to 12.1 with one lone exception here, and let's look at that real quick. Obviously, we support upgrades from legacy SAV 9X and 10X to 12.1 or 12.1 RU1. We can go from SEP 11 RU1 to RU6 to SEP 12.1 RTM and then to SEP 12.1 RU1. We can now, as of the SEP 12.1 RU1 release, go directly from RU7 on the SEP 11 side. So this is a very important thing. There was a little bit of lag when SEP 12.1 came out, and that you couldn't upgrade from SEP 11 RU7 directly to 12.1. But now that RU1 of 12.1 has been released, we can go from really any version of SEP 11 to that release. One other thing I want to highlight here is there is a cross-grade opportunity. If you are on a small business edition, we can perform a direct upgrade to the enterprise edition of SEP 12.1. And the lone exception on this page, you'll see we cannot cross-grade from an enterprise edition back down to a small business edition. So again, something to keep in mind, consult your account executive or your salesperson to make sure that you're engaging with the right version for your organization. So let's talk a little bit about migration best practices so that we understand what processes we need to go through before we engage in our migration. One, we want to identify any of our infrastructure components that need to be disposed or decommissioned. And this could be SAV, primary or secondary servers. If you're on SEP 11 already, we may engage in a re-architecture. So we may dispose of some of your SEPM servers. Of course, we always have live update admin servers and GUPS in the mix. So the idea here is we want to make sure that we account for all those infrastructure components and have a clear migration plan before we start doing any work. Really the first part of a migration process is installing or upgrading your Symantec Endpoint Protection managers. And I want to make it clear that we're able to do this now in SEP 12 and manage your legacy clients without having to upgrade all of those at the same time. This means that I can move from SEP 11 to SEP 12 on my protection manager and then begin my migration process for my endpoints. And I can still manage SEP 11 and SEP 12 clients side by side. SEP 12 also includes the same parity of support for live update admin servers. So what we're going to do there is we're going to provide complete protection throughout the migration process. It doesn't have to be a clean break, and that's something I like to highlight about the product. Next point I want to make here is I want to make sure that you test a substantial sample or cross-section of all of your endpoints with all of the available migration options to determine your best approach. In some cases, this may be a direct upgrade. You may want to do what we call a rip and replace or clean uninstall and reinstall. You may have a third-party software delivery product or something like Altair software delivery that you want to actually roll out a package with, or do it directly through the SEPM or one of the other complementary tools. So there are a myriad of options here, and we want to make sure that we test all of those against a good sampling of your endpoints so that we understand what the the success rate's going to be, that we validate that, and we understand how to take the best approach for that. And again, when we're upgrading SAV in SEP 11 and then limited third-party endpoint protection clients, we can actually do those directly. So this is a great way to simplify the migration process because it doesn't require a lot of manual or scripted work. I do want to set the expectation that in most environments we're able to directly upgrade SAV 9, SAV 10, and SEP 11 clients directly to 12. Again, that's not going to be the same for every environment. It needs to be assessed and thought about before you engage in that migration product. But again, I want to set the expectation that it is possible with the product today. So let's jump right into the features and talk a little bit about performance first. Something that I like to tell customers is the perceived and real impact to your endpoints is greatly reduced in SEP 12. It's a fantastic product. The scan engine behind it works excellently, and we've been really pleased with not only the reduction in impact to the system itself, but actually the perception by end users. So this can be a touchy subject for a lot of IT shops, as the end users will often lay blame to various management agents for things that are going on with their computer. And SEP 12 is a great upgrade path to take because it's one of the things that can reduce the perceived impact to your end user systems and really provide a positive perception of that product and your services. Just informally in our testing, I would say we see about half the memory and CPU usage versus SEP 11 during a live scan, something like auto protect or a scheduled scan. Again, the perceived impact has been greatly reduced. In most cases, our end users don't even know that a scan is happening now. And again, these are all positive things that can lead to an improved relationship between your IT group and your end users, management's perception of the product and its implementation, and their view of Symantec products as a whole. And of course, those are all things that we want to have a positive perception of. The MaxSep client, a lot of changes here. I can describe it best as saying it's much closer now in feature parity and the visual identity. It looks very close to the Windows SEP 12 client. It's much less obtrusive. We have much better control over things like the live update pop-ups and all sort of windows that you used to see on SEP 11 on the Mac side. It really can run silently in the background just like on Windows now. And so that's a great improvement that I've enjoyed seeing. Another thing that I want to highlight about Mac clients, because we do see a little bit more penetration in enterprises with the Mac now, the Mac SEP client can be now deployed and managed from the SEPA. So this is going to greatly reduce the manual overhead required on your part to get the SEP clients out there and manage them, because we now have one unified centralized console from which we can deploy and manage both platforms. And again, I've noted this in a couple other places, but I like to highlight it under performance. We no longer require IIS at all for SEP 12. In SEP 11, we did require IIS to run the web services for reporting, but now in 12, it runs entirely on the Apache engine, so we don't need IIS on that server at all. So moving on here to protection, you see I've highlighted some terminology here. These are really the component technology names from Symantec, and we'll talk a little bit about these throughout the presentation here, but I want to highlight these. One important one is download insight, right? Browsers, email, IAMs, other sorts of sharing tools are very common exploit vectors. Typically something that we see in enterprises where these are being exploited is there known exploits that exploit vulnerabilities in the operating system or in applications or sometime in web services. So we're able to add an extra layer of protection here by stopping those exploits at the point of entry, meaning that end user's browser, their email client, or an IM client, we can actually add a level of protection right at the endpoint there. Something that works in conjunction with download insight is insight lookup, meaning I can identify atypical threats, things that I wouldn't think would be an exploit or a threat can actually be referred against Symantec's Insight database using the lookup tool and then assessed by Symantec inside the tool itself. Something else we can do, again, you'll see the word insight, but this part I'm really talking about the Symantec and community intelligence databases that have information about files, things that may look suspicious or be a true exploit or threat. We can leverage insight to share that information and leverage it in your own environment. Next thing I want to talk about is the shared insight cache. Now, although it has the word incited in again, it's a little bit different. With this particular component, we're talking specifically about virtual infrastructures, meaning that if I have a hypervisor with, let's say, 100 VM guests on it, I can actually set up a shared insight cache on that hypervisor, which is basically a guest on it, and I can allow all of the virtual instances on that hypervisor to share that cache. They're basically sharing their scan results. That allows me to perform really what's a deduplication of effort, in that I can share the data and the intelligence collected by each individual scan engine so that I can improve the performance and lessen the impact on my virtual infrastructure. And that's a very important technology to highlight in SEP 12.1. And then next, last thing on this slide I want to talk about, if you're familiar with TrueScan, TrueScan is the proactive threat protection from SEP 11. And the thing about TrueScan is it runs on a schedule. Now Sonar provides not only an improved level of malware and virus protection, but Sonar runs all the time on the endpoint. And again, I'll refer back to my performance slide. Even with Sonar running all times versus just the scheduled TrueScan, we still see a reduced impact on the endpoint. So this is all very good news. We're raising the level of protection and we're reducing the impact on the endpoint and improving your end user perception of the product. Let's talk a little bit about management now. A few important changes in the SEP 12.1 product. First and foremost, you can manage all licensing of your SEP installation from within the SEP manager itself. I can install licenses, I can activate my licenses, I can acquire new licenses, and I can do all of that from within the console itself. This is much better than having to go out to a website or acquire a serial, follow up with a bunch of people. Again, if I'm managing the product and I'm managing the licensing, I can do it all in one place. Another feature we like to highlight is that SEP 12.1 is able to be managed and used within Symantec Protection Center version 2. So again, this is sort of like a portal or a place that we can collate a bunch of different security products and leverage reporting across them. So we want to highlight that SEP 12.1 supports SPC version 2. Couple of improvements here to account management. At the SEPM login screen, you can now email a forgotten password to an end user. So if you're using SEP accounts and credentials, you can actually send a user with a valid email address entered a password reminder. Another thing that we can do is site administrators can reset their own password. And I think it's important to make the distinction here. This doesn't really apply to system administrators. If I assign an administrator to a site within my SEPM site, I can actually allow them to reset their own password, but it only occurs within that site. So there isn't danger of them getting access to a site to which they haven't been given privilege. Then final thing I want to highlight here under management, something that has been somewhat of an issue in SEP 11 is making sure that we understand an endpoint status with still infected, and that we're able to remediate that and then update the status of that endpoint. So I'm happy to report that the still infected status has been reworked in SEP 12.1. It's much more accurate, and we have some reporting in the console out of the box that's able to leverage that so that we can understand what our infection landscape looks like and respond to that appropriately. And something else I just wanted to highlight here, you'll notice on my screen, this is actually a notice from my SEPM that today that lets me know my license is expiring. And if you look at the big red arrow there, you'll notice it gives me an address for the SEPM to which I need to go address the licensing issue. So this is a great improvement, and something I want to highlight about this email is these emails actually will render correctly and show up on BlackBerry, iPhone, and Android. So we do have a little bit of mobile management intersection here. So if you're a SEP manager and you need to manage alerts or license problems or user requests, those kind of things, you can do all of that on the go now through the notification. So let's talk a little bit about some enhancements for virtual environments. This is an important aspect of the Symantec 12.1 release as we see more enterprises move to large virtual infrastructures. We want to make sure that our endpoint protection software is able to work well with that and again generate a positive perception in the enterprise. So one thing the SEPM now does at the agent level performs a hypervisor detection. So we'll know if you're on a virtual infrastructure and what your role is. We have a few complementary tools that can help us improve the performance in virtual environments. First of which is an offline image scanner. This is very important for VMware environments because I can scan your offline VMDKs and I can ensure that there are no known threats or active infections inside of that disk image. And this can all be done in an offline state. Our shared insight cache server, which I highlighted earlier, allows various guests on a hypervisor to consolidate their scan results into a single store and then to deduplicate those efforts for the subsequent scans. So that's a great improvement. Again, we want to make sure that we're not overwhelming arrays or our backplanes. So this is something that helps us deal with both storage and network capacity issues on a virtual infrastructure because we can leverage the Insight cache server. Then finally, virtual image exception. This is great for our VMware image builders because it allows us to whitelist trusted files in the image. So if you're working in a clean environment, a secure environment, and you build a new VM image, we can actually allow you to use this tool to go through and whitelist various files. So those will then be skipped for various inspection points because we're going to mark them as trusted. And again, this is something that improves performance in a virtual environment. And now I want to talk a little bit about what's new in the latest release. So we're currently at SEP 12.1 Rollup 1, which came out in November of 2011. A few things that we want to highlight here. We now support Windows XP Embedded SP3 or later, Windows Embedded Standard 7, Windows Small Business Server 2003, and macOS 10.7, which is known as the Lion release, all support the current 12.1 RU1 SEP client. Something else that's important for our government and other sector customers, we now have FIPS 140-2 Level 1 compliance in the product, meaning we can secure communications between the consoles and the servers and from server to server and meet the requirements of that regulation. Another thing I'd like to highlight is our browser intrusion prevention now supports Firefox 5, 6, and 7. So if Firefox, the later release, is something that you're rolling out or currently managing in your enterprise, we can give you a level of protection with browser IPS there. There are a few issues. A lot of things have been resolved in RU1, so it's primarily a maintenance release, but the list of fixed issues is quite long and worth a read. And so I've supplied the URL for that here. If you want to just jot it down, the article you're looking for on SimWise is Tech 174-565. And again, that's going to cover all of the known and resolved issues in the current shipping product. Okay, so what I want to do now is talk about some things to know. And this is what I mean when we say we're going to go beyond the documentation. These are things that we've learned or that we've discovered throughout deployments and implementations of this product, and it's things we want to make sure that all of our customers know, whether they're engaging in a self-implementation or with a qualified partner. So first and foremost, you don't need Internet Explorer for many of the management console functions. Again, our SEPM manager console can run inside of a jar, but we may need Internet Explorer for certain report exports. So again, if you work in Firefox or Chrome day to day, you can do almost everything, but when it comes to generating reports, you're still going to need to drop back into IE to render some of those things. Along with the IE changes, again, I want to highlight IIS is no longer required, especially if you have a SEPM that's out in a DMZ or behind a reverse proxy, and we want to lower our attack profile. We don't need to have IIS on that box now. Again, everything's running through the internal SEPM Apache Tomcat engine, so we're covered there. So don't install IIS before you install your SEPM. Something else I like to highlight, deployment is a lot easier to manage now because we have customizable reboot schedules. So when we deploy a SEP client to a Windows endpoint, we now have a lot of options around controlling that reboot behavior and schedule. I can even deploy the SEP client at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday and tell it to reboot Friday night to complete that installation and activate any components that I need to. So that's a great improvement in the latest release and something worth highlighting. And again, I mentioned this earlier, but we want to make sure we point out that both Mac and Windows SEP clients are managed from the single console now. So there's no separate web console for the Mac. There isn't an additional product you need to buy. Out of the box, you're going to be able to manage both platforms from within the SEPM. Something that I don't have on the slide, but it is worth mentioning, if you're a SEP 11 customer and you've encountered some challenges with managing 64-bit clients, I do want to point out that across the component technologies in SEP 12.1, we now have feature parity with 32 and 64-bit hosts. So there aren't different policies to follow. There aren't different things to configure. Windows 32 and 64-bit architectures are supported by the same policies now and with the same feature set. A few more things that we want to talk about if we're looking at an implementation. When we discuss replication partners in SEP 12.1, what we're really talking about is the ability to exchange log data and configuration data and updates and version info between SEPMs, either across a global architecture or maybe just a business architecture. So something important in SEP 12.1, we don't need to break those relationships now to perform SEPM upgrades. We're able to keep those relationships in place and then perform our SEPM upgrades in a phased manner. Something else that's changed about replication data, it's actually a version check now at each operation. So we basically do a CRC on that replication data, and that helps us avoid any corrupt data moving between SEPMs because it's not going to run unless it passes a version check. Something else I want to highlight, and again, if you're implementing a global architecture, there is value to engaging a qualified partner to help you with that architecture, but two things that are very important that I want to point out. When you're replicating over the WAN, there are special considerations here. First and foremost, don't raise the number of content revisions that you're retaining before you add replication partners, because that's going to add significantly to the amount of data that needs to be sent over that initial replication. So if you're familiar with the SEPM management and you understand what I'm talking about, Keep that at 1 to 3 revisions while you build your replication architecture, because you don't want to be sending 10 gigs of data over each WAN link just to add the replication relationship. And going along with that, something we like to highlight is when you're replicating over the WAN, you should only be sending logs. Nearly every network infrastructure just doesn't have the bandwidth or the latency performance required to replicate anything other than logs, so we always recommend that you do only that. Again, there are only special cases, but as a rule of thumb, if we're going over the LAN between SEPM replication partners, we're only going to send logs. So a few more things to know. Another thing I like to highlight here is we have a simplified recovery model in SEP 12.1. If you've administrated SEP 11 before, you know there are a lot of manual steps to go gather various files, your encryption keys, certificates, all of that stuff in order to prepare for disaster recovery. In SEP 12.1, we can now generate really a single recovery file that allows us to have a one-step restoration for DR purposes. So that's a great improvement. It's going to reduce the overhead on your admins, and it's not something that whenever you make a change or an upgrade, you're not going to have to go around and gather a bunch of manual files now. We can generate really a single recovery instance that we can then use for DR purposes. Another change in the 12.1 product is we now have automatic maintenance on the database from within the SEP management console. This performs truncation of tables and some reindexing, so we're going to be able to do backups and we're going to be able to do our maintenance, and that can be performed automatically. Something that I want to caution you with, when you are performing backups with the internal SEPM utility, although you can control the frequency and schedule of those backups, you cannot change the file location within SEPM itself. If you wanted to do a folder redirection or an NTFS junction on your own, that is a potential mitigation for that. But I do want to warn you that if you're using an internal backup function, that path is hard-coded. So you need to make sure that you have a workaround in place for that if you don't have the disk space on your SEPM to account for that. Those of you that are Altiris or the Symantec Management Suite customers, we do have IT Analytics integration. I do want to point out that if you want to integrate with IT Analytics and leverage the multi-CMDB function, your SEP database must be SQL. It cannot be the embedded database, and it must have a local SQL account. So that means that when you install SQL for your SEP, you need to make sure that it's in mixed mode. And then finally on this slide, last thing I want to highlight here, network threat protection technologies, so the firewall and IPS components can now be independently deployed and managed. Those of you that are SEP 11 customers were accustomed to having to deploy both, and if you, let's say you wanted to use firewall but not IPS or vice versa, you needed to configure policies and withdraw them, we can now manage those components independently and use one or the other or both. SEP 12.1 is one of the most complete and reliable products ever shipped by Symantec. I truly believe that as both a partner and a former customer. They really hit at all points with this product, and we've had some great success with implementations here. The enhancements to the component technologies, bring a higher level of threat intelligence and mitigation than you're going to get with some other solutions. So I think it's important to highlight what Symantec is doing with this product, and the quality of the component technologies is a big driver. And again, all of this is bundled into a single endpoint agent. If you're using another product where you have separate management agents on the endpoint for, let's say, policy, execution of scans, and IPS or firewall interdiction, again, we have a single agent on the endpoint, a single point of management, and everything's bundled together. We have integration with really the best-in-breed systems management platform, the Symantec Management Platform. So again, we can leverage that with IT Analytics or with the SEP integration component. If you're an Altiris or Symantec Management Platform customer and you know what those are, again, heed some of our things to know, and you're going to see a great deal of success with gathering data out of your SEP environment and marrying that with what you're getting out of the Symantec Management Platform. And again, SEP is highly scalable and flexible, right? We can support tens of thousands of endpoints with a single SEPM. We have the ability to do failover. We have the ability to do shared support or load balancing. and we really support location awareness and transient endpoints. So all of those things that we want to manage highly mobile endpoints anywhere in the world, we got those features in SEP 12.1, and the solution really lines up perfectly with where most enterprises are at today. So what are the next steps? Well, obviously, consider SEP 12.1 as part of your infrastructure defense model. Again, the endpoint is always part of the attack profile. You want to make sure that you have adequate protection there along with your network protection and information protection models. We want to plan our implementation with integration in mind, right? So if we want to get great intelligence out of SEP, we want to make sure that we can hook it into IT analytics. If we want to hook it into IT analytics, we want to make sure that we implement with SQL. So this is what I'm talking about. A chain of events is going to lead to great success there, but we want to make sure we have in mind all the requirements to do that. And again, my advice, always engage a qualified partner if you want to architect resilient and secure protection infrastructures. If you need things like load balancing and failover in a global network of endpoint protection, this is something a partner can help you do. We can also provide optimization for the communication and all of the policy within SEP. And we really want to help you extend the value of your investment in SEP by implementing some of the advanced component policies. So if you've been a SEP customer for a while and you haven't really gotten to where you want to be with app and device control or host integrity or IPS, those are things that a partner can help you do. And just a few items here that I like to talk about at each webinar. If you're looking for information about products or finding known or resolved issues, SimWise is the place to go. Something I like to advise all customers of is when you're searching in the knowledge base, make sure you qualify that with a product. So like in the graphic here, you'd want to type in endpoint protection. You'll get a result for that, and then put your search terms in the left-hand box there. Make sure that your search is scoped to the appropriate product. So where can you get more information about anything we've covered in today's webinar or ITS? There's a phone number, 877-ALTIRIS. You can find us at itsdelivers.com. If you're interested in any of our previous videos or webinars, including this one at some point in the near future, you can find us on vimeo.com/ITS Partners or search for ITS Partners in the iTunes podcast directory.